You know, I would have never really put my money on the idea that Loki's giant lightning god hammer is actually a squirrel, but hey, that's Oda for you, man. Loki's got some truly insane power. He did actually eat a devil fruit, might be a dragon, might be a wolf god, and can now completely ignore the greatest threat to Elbaf, the Holy Knights. So the real question is, how he done it? What's his true form, and what's up with Shanks while we're at it too, because there's some crazy stuff going on with him as well. And, of course, most importantly, why am I wearing a tie? Well, I'd rather not say. So, as you can probably guess, we need to talk about Loki and Ragnir right away, right? That's what you're here for mostly, and I kind of need to talk about my squirrel hammer, my new favorite thing in One Piece. And I'll say it, I think it was pretty much on the money last chapter when I discussed what the mythical devil fruit of Elbaf actually might be, and also what Ragnir's purpose might be. Because you know what? Sometimes shotgun blasting some theory ideas works wonders for me. But boy, let me be real with you here. I did not expect the twist that Oda threw at us with the hammer, like squirrel form. I was definitely very lost at first seeing this, like a dog chasing a squirrel into traffic. Now, to be fair though, this is actually not normal for me because I'm awful with directions and often a little bit scared and confused.
I don't know what any of this shit is, and I'm fucking scared.
I can't imagine I was the only one caught at least a little bit off guard, you know, like by Oda's big squirrel hammer surprise. I'm sure some of you were too, at least I hope so. Please don't tell me I'm alone being confused about this. Okay, but then I actually read a book. Heck, I even read 2 books probably in my life, and it became pretty clear exactly what Oda was actually doing with Ragnir once I saw all the pieces now finally being in play here, right? And trust me when I say, this squirrel has got a mean bite, since it does seem that Ragnir is actually pulling from several mythological characters at the same time, and I do think I figured out how it might actually work, and if I'm even partly right, it's absolutely insane. Again, my new favorite thing in One Piece. I want a squirrel hammer. Goddamn. Okay, let's start with why this big ol' hammer becomes a little tiny baby squirrel, but like, low-key thinking about it, this thing probably is like still 40 feet tall. It's just so easy to forget with Elbaf, right? Big squirrel, bigger Loki, and since I assume not all of you play God of War or Smite, you might not be familiar with the smallest and sassiest inhabitant of the Norse mythology world, which is Ratatoskr. Now, in Norse mythology, Ratatoskr, if that is how it's correctly pronounced, very sorry, it's not exactly powerful in the traditional sense, not like me. Rat doesn't destroy worlds, he doesn't devour gods, and he doesn't bring Ragnarok crashing down or anything spicy or crazy like that. Instead, Ratatoskr does something far more dangerous. He yaps. Sometimes I even think it'd be more accurate to call him Yapatoskr. God, dude, sometimes my team makes me say the dumbest things for their own amusement. Sorry, but... Anyways, he moves information, and as we've all learned throughout history, there's something much more important than materialistic things.
Knowledge.
Instead of a power trip, what this pesky rodent actually does is just run up and down Yggdrasil, the world tree, right? Carrying sick, nasty burns and insults between the eagle sitting at the top and the Nidhugger, the sick and twisted, ill-minded dragon gnawing at the roots of the tree. Which is, of course, what the Atom Tree and its 3 layers literally represent in One Piece. So, what can we actually gather from that, right? Well, to me, it seems like this girthy hammer Ragnir is gonna be like Eminem, like a Dislord. Yeah, that's it. No big crazy powers or destroying Emu. Loki just got a hammer that's highly proficient in the ancient art of
Loki
talking. Actually, you might not know this, but Sun Tzu actually wrote about this in The Art of War or something. Trust me, man. I'm just playing. Ratatoskr is actually super powerful and important because he's one of the guardians of the World Tree and responsible for inciting a lot of very big conflicts, actually. As you probably might have realized at this point, he's got a special knack for pissing people off, like kind of Dio Brando levels of full-on hater, but it's pretty clear that Oda wants us to look at this connection in relation to Loki, right? You know, with the whole starting beef for no reason, because that's kind of literally how Loki introduced himself at the start of the story. Remember when we first met Loki? He constantly bullies, incites pointless arguments, makes fun of Shanks. He's a top tier filthy memer is what I'm saying, but it's also pretty clear that Ragnir isn't just, representing Ratatoskr. It does seem like he's got that Big Daddy Fafnir energy too. Shoutouts to Faffy Boy, by the way, he's a real one and arguably just as big as a part of Ragnir's lore as Rat is. Let me fill you in. It sort of seems to confirm that the name Ragnir is actually a play on Ratatoskr and Fafnir, as we speculated in the last chapter review, right? Plus a little bit of Ragnarok in the middle for good measure. Anyways, again, if you don't know what I'm talking about, who is the Faf guy? Well, just like how Ragnir protects the treasure room and the mythical fruit of Elbaf, Fafnir has a very similar role in Norse mythology, as he is a massive treasure hoard guarding dragon. He is definitely a source myth for the dragon in Beowulf, and my goat Smaug from The Hobbit, including the ring, and is one of the original myths for the entire fantasy trope in general of dragons guarding fat stacks of gold. I gotta say, my personal favorite dragon is the fat one from the Dungeons & Dragons movie. That one was pretty fun. And similar to the Lokster, right, Fafnir murdered his own father to claim his cursed treasure, then transformed himself into a monster whose pretty much sole purpose was to guard that same treasure, which, if you did read all the stuff for chapter 1170, lines up with exactly what Loki had to do in this very chapter. Rest in pieces, by the way, Papa Harold, right? You will be missed by all the bald boys around the world, so not me, yet. Ugh, fingers crossed. So, what do I think all of this actually means for Loki and his story? Well, it's pretty interesting, first of all, to me, honestly, because Loki having a magically transforming hammer leads me to believe that Ragnir is possibly gonna have even more purposes besides just big lightning hammer strikes. It also makes me kind of want to believe that Oda will appease the, internet's inner 8-year-old girl and give Loki a magical girl transformation, which would be really funny. Ragnir being based on a transforming dragon and rat means that there, at very least, could be more transformations available, right? And I'm not gonna bore you with too many details here, but you probably already know that Loki, the real Loki in Norse mythology, is absolutely known for taking on many different forms and shapes, and I do think it would be a very sick way to, integrate that as a reference in his One Piece character through Ragnir in this case. And I think it's also fairly possible to assume that Ragnir might be able to turn into other creatures besides Ratatoskr, such as Fafnir, Fenrir, a Draugr, the whole 9 yards, basically, right? Its transformations might just be locked to Elbathian beasts instead of people like Katarina Devon's forms, who can transform into anyone that she touches. I, for one, think that this would be a really rad power, and I kind of wonder if that would only apply to beasts, or can it, become other weapons too, other people? Actually, thinking about it a little bit more right now, if that were possible, right? That could low-key explain something that's been absolutely pissing me off about Ragnir. Why is it a hammer, right? In the mural from chapter 1138, we see a Loki-like figure carrying a massive pike or spear, not a hammer. Look, okay, zoom. Punch in, enhance, look at the spear. It's spearing, it's not hammering, but if Ragnir can take on the shape of the weapon its user truly wants, then this Loki, who has always used a big hammer, would clearly want Ragnir to be in hammer form. Kind of like shape-shifting in whatever the user really needs at that point. Now, to be fair, that might not be the case. Last time I talked about this, I also pitched the idea that Ragnir is a weapon that has been passed down by the Hammer clan, the original Galela, and so it might just be a squirrel dragon hammer, and that's fine too, and pretty cool. That spear thing just kind of irks me a little bit, man, so I really hope that Ragnir can just become a bunch of different things. It kind of let me, lower my medication dosages a little bit, and again, we talked about this before, but I really like the idea that potentially Ragnir might even be a legendary weapon that Nika and Joy Boy potentially used as well. Think about it. Ragnir might just be part of the Elbathian, national treasure. It's in the same room as the legendary devil fruit, but who says the fruit is the only thing? We already know that Loki thinks he is the sun god, and this clearly isn't based on him eating that devil fruit. It might just be related to Ragnir itself, because what if Ragnir was actually the weapon used by Joy Boy or by Nika? And if it could actually transform into other weapons, wouldn't that make a lot of sense? Because, for example, we see Joy Boy in the mural using a sword and a shield with his Joy Boy mark on it, but we also get an image of Nika using a sword and a spear, so who knows if, Ragnir can change forms. It might just be that it originally belonged to the sun god being tied to Elbaf, and Elbaf, having this hammer / weapon that can shapeshift in its secret vault in the throne room that they've been guarding for hundreds of years, and with, by the way, the hammer / squirrel dragon thing actively guarding that devil fruit that we think Rox wanted Harold to eat as part of the 2 devil fruits that he needed to take down Emu, one of which we kind of assume is the Nika fruit anyways. It kind of makes sense. Now, does that mean that Luffy is gonna get Ragnir from Loki? I personally don't think so. I still really like the idea alternatively that Loki is kind of an essential puzzle piece for Luffy to take down the government, and that they're gonna have this kind of crazy epic bromance going on until the end of the story. But I mean, it is absolutely a possibility that Loki gives it to Luffy, or there's also still the, unresolved giant sword sticking out of Elbaf. Maybe Luffy's just gonna take that, and maybe that's related to Ragnir in some way or shape too. I don't know. And I'll tell you this, something that also stood out from Loki's fight with Ragnir in this chapter is actually not from the fight itself, but what it implied about a previous Loki moment we had in the story, because when Loki met Shamrock, he was very confused about Cerberus, the sword that Shamrock uses too. But why? Like, if he himself has a hammer that can go full Pokemon mode, why would the sword seem so bizarre to Loki? Well, I do think that just kind of goes to prove that one of those weapons is different than the other. Either Ragnir isn't a fruit-based thing at all, or Cerberus isn't a fruit-based power, but I kind of feel like they're 2 different things. If I had to choose, I'd say that Cerberus is the outlier here because of the Abyss stuff and the crazy things going on with that power, which, by the way, I just want to quickly acknowledge now seems to be just a straight-up 4th power system in One Piece on top of everything, right? But hey, we'll take it. And another big thing to speculate on here, and I kind of implore you to all look into this one a little bit more as well on your own time, right? What is the actual timeline of this? Think about it. Harold full-on says that nobody has eaten the mythical devil fruit for a while because Ragnir's protecting it. And so if it's been guarding the fruit all this time to the point where the fruit has supposedly never been eaten, how old exactly is Ragnir? Like, seriously, how does that work? Is he or she as old as Zunisha? Is he or she as old as Emeth? Or even older than that? Like, could Ragnir suddenly be the oldest living character in One Piece who's fought with Nika and Joy Boy? Because if it is the oldest and it is conscious, what does the hammer know? Does it know the story of the Void Century? Or possibly even further, does it know about the first One Piece world? I mean, you kind of have to assume so, but if it's also been locked in the room, who knows, maybe it's been that old but didn't see anything. I mean, one could make the case that it is close to the same age as devil fruits if nobody has actually ever eaten that fruit specifically. But if that's the case, then also, how do they know what the fruit actually does? Or did they just kind of like hope it was legendary because a hammer was guarding? Like, I don't know, I suddenly just care a little bit more about the order of events with this hammer and its little fruity companion. But maybe this is like a waste of time. So let's now switch over, because I kind of need to address another big point of contention, which should at least in theory tie also into this Ragnir rat stuff. What's going on with the Heaven Realm in Elbaf? Okay. Seriously, it's like non-existent at this point, and that seems somewhat problematic to me. Oh, you might be wondering, why did the setup change? Well, now that I'm back in Europe for the holidays, I do miss Japan's snacks more than anything, and that includes my cat Gojo, but thankfully I've got a taste of Japan right here, thanks to Tokyo Treat. And it's time to start the countdown because this month's theme is New Year's snacking. This box is all about good luck and fun flavors with New Year rice crackers, truffle cheese bites, red bean taiyaki, and fried potato stick. And I gotta say, there's really nothing like some stick potato to get me really going. And really, all these delicious snacks are giving me the energy that I need to usher in 2026. But Tokyo Treat doesn't just fuel my body, it also fuels my brain, because each of these boxes comes with a cultural booklet with fun facts, descriptions of each single treat, and of course allergy information. So I'm learning. For example, that's why I know that despite its fishy shape, this taiyaki doesn't actually have any fish in it at all. It's actually delicious red bean paste. Now, of course, I've got to round it out with some dessert because one of my favorite parts about Tokyo Treat is that you get a unique Japanese Kit Kat flavor every time, because this month is chocolate mint ice cream. Break me off a piece? Well, don't mind if I do. So celebrate New Year's the right way with some real Japanese flavor in the comfort of your own home, you know, or give the Japan lover in your life the perfect holiday gift by checking out their New Year deals in the link below, or use my code Ohara to get $5 off your first box. With that, Europe me is gonna take a snack break while Japan me is gonna have to keep working on that video. So let's go back to that. The third part of Elbaf, the top part, the most important one maybe, is like not being addressed in this arc whatsoever. And if Loki's hammer represents Ratatoskr, a squirrel who delivers messages between the beast of the underworld, Loki, and the heavenly eagle, who is the eagle? Seriously, who is the eagle? Who's up in the heaven realm that will be tied to all of these shenanigans? Because, come on, someone has to, right? But then I must gonna say, Oda might have, given us the answer already at Jump Festa recently. Got a video dropping soon that kind of goes into all of the stuff that he might have meant by that, but it does seem like we're going to meet the man marked by flames very soon, and seeing as Kid was looking for him and was trying to go to Elbaf, kind of feel pretty confident saying that he's got to be tied to the Giants' homeland in some way at least. So maybe he's just way higher up than we all ever realized. Maybe marked by flames just means that he has wicked sunburn from being high above the clouds all the time. Maybe not that one, but I still think it could make a lot of sense. If not that, then something at least needs to be there, dude. Like, Loki's doing something up there and it's gonna be relevant. If you've been watching the channel for a while now, I have of course speculated about what might be happening on the top of the world tree in Elbaf before we ever saw it, right? There was the idea that I really love that the official entrance to the Sky Islands might have been up there in the Heavenly Realm. That doesn't seem as likely anymore, though I guess it could be that the sky clouds just drift by, and then when they hit the top layer of Elbaf and the tree, you might be able to go there. Could be cool. I still like the idea that Enel and Arush might make an appearance here, but it kind of also really depends on how long Elbaf is still going to last as an arc. Like, I'm not sure if I ever went into too much detail on the channel here, because I talked about this a lot on the podcast, Drink Sake, which I have, if you don't know, but basically, I'm very much hoping that Elbaf is going to be a lot longer than it does feel like it's going to end up right now, because it kind of felt like we went there, got introduced to the Holy Knights, Emu came, then we got the God Valley flashback, and now we're going to get this big confrontation between, like, Loki and Luffy and Emu and the Holy Knights. But if that's the whole Elbaf arc, I'd be a little bit sad, because it feels like there is so much to explore still about this island that we have not seen. I thought that Elbaf would have been this crazy, huge world. Again, it's the largest island in One Piece that we'd spend at least a good couple of years exploring. Maybe not crazy like Wano for 4 years, but 2 or 3. At the moment, it feels like we're moving on faster, but theoretically, if something is still gonna happen in the Sky Realm, in the Heavenly Realm, that could explain why we're moving so fast right now, so the story then shifts over up the tree, right, and whatever's going on there. And I personally think having some, Heavenly Realm, Sky Island shenanigans, whether it's with Enel or with Aruj or something completely different, could be really cool. It might also be elves that live up there. We still haven't seen elves in One Piece at all. I have talked about this before. The Tontada are dwarfs, and I would just really, from a fantasy perspective, love to see some elves. And we do know that in the mythology, at least, there are elves on the world tree, so that could be cool. Or maybe it's something completely different. Maybe someone else is hiding up there. Maybe there's some crazy soul shenanigans or dead stuff, or maybe heralds, who I speculate might still be alive, being up there. I don't know. I just want to see the Heaven Realm and see what's going on there, and I do believe in Oda that he's actually going to give us something, again, with the entire world tree. Like, he's pulling from it so much, there must be some payoff for it. Maybe a giant flying creature that kind of complements Zunisha on the, sea level, and then the Sea Kings below. Something connected to Uranus, maybe? I don't know. Something, please. Maybe it's just a giant eagle like in the actual mythology. Alright, so you kind of got all that, right? all the stuff about Fafnir being a dragon, defender of treasure like Ragnir, and Ratatoskr is the big bad squirrel of Norse mythology, who's also clearly Ragnir too. Pretty clear cut at this point, I think. I absolutely dig it, but it now kind of makes sense also why Oda chose to reveal that Ragnir can transform into a squirrel. But how exactly did that enable Loki to override the Holy Knight's immortality, since like we just saw the man defeat his dad? Now, to be fair here, chapter 1170 did reveal that Scarper does actually know, to a certain degree at least, how to override the Holy Knight's immortality, right? Was the secret music, which I fully broke down in a video that I haven't released yet? No, which makes that one feel a little bit irrelevant now, but let me know if you want me to drop it anyhow, because there is still some very interesting stuff in there about the power of music and how that might affect Emu's powers. Very sad that this one thing didn't work out. Or is the secret a new type of hockey maybe? Also no, as many have guessed, in a slightly disappointing reveal I will say, Scarper shows us that yes, you can stop the Holy Knights and defeat them by just pumping them full of Conqueror's hockey. Not! You thought so, huh? No, Scarper does say something like that, but clearly the Holy Knights have not died or been defeated. Really, all the Conqueror hockey luckily does is drastically slow down the regeneration, but it doesn't override it, and it doesn't help at all with immortality, because we saw that when Scarper came in the current storyline and fought Summers. It's sort of just putting it a little bit on halt or slow mode, but we do know from Zebek, Roger, and Garp's moment on God Valley that you can blow someone's head off with Conqueror attacks, and it does not stop them actually from eventually regenerating. Which actually does help give a lot of credit to why Loki did need the fruit to actually slay his father. Also, quick side note here, I did love here that Oda revealed why Summers feared Scarper specifically so much finally. Them not interacting on God Valley was a bit of a shame and letdown at first, but now we actually know that Scarper and Summers did cross blade many times because of little old Shanks, it turns out. Apparently, you see, the Holy Knight somehow knew that Roger in the end had Garling's kid. How they know that, I've got no idea. He didn't have a covenant tattoo as a baby, so I've got no clue. I don't know, maybe they've just been keeping tabs on the Roger pirates in general after he fought Zebek and Emu. Maybe Big News Morgans took some photos and Garling was like, hey, that looks like Shamrock, but Shamrock's standing next to me. Where are you, Shamrock? And he was like, oh yeah, that's Shanks. Also, wait, like, hold on. That means that Shanks pretty much has known his whole life that he was a celestial dragon. And not only that, Buggy also knows, and definitely Mihawk too then. That definitely adds some extra credit to the whole former celestial dragon Mihawk theory, I think, which didn't really need more to begin with, because there is so much there at this point. I would be more surprised if he wasn't. Also, thinking about it, have we ever seen shirtless Mihawk? Have we gotten full-on ripped strongest swordsman? The tattoo stuff is like super important, really, come to think of it. It's kind of one of these things that kind of makes you wonder, right? It's like so many people ended up knowing about Emu and the Holy Knights. How many people knew about Shanks being a celestial dragon? And like, how does this play into his interaction with a lot of stuff? It, of course, explains, like the Gorosei scene and stuff like that, but kind of makes you wonder how the Marines would interact with the, like, red-hair pirates, too. Do they have to hold back? Like, are they not allowed to hurt Shanks actively? And is that why Shanks has this crazy political power, too? Kind of very cool, gotta say, to, like, think about that stuff and, like, how that might have shaped his influence on the entire world. And I will say, it's pretty nice to kind of be able to just piece together how Shanks got up to the Holy Land, because clearly he was being hunted by the God's Knight, so it feels like he really was just probably able to walk into a world government facility or even just like hang out wherever for them so that they could bring him up after Roger's death. And it wasn't like this crazy thing that he needed to do. He just needed to walk up somewhere and be like, hey, I want to be a celestial dragon now. Like, easiest infiltration ever. I can actually totally see a world where Shanks hit the Holy Knights with the good old, guys, thank godness the Roger pirates finally disbanded and I'm finally free from their evil pirate clutches. Please let me meet my dad. I love him so much, fellow world nobles. Good day, sir. I did that once during middle school, and it was a wild time, let me tell you that. Well, back to the immortality stuff though. What I think Scopper was actually showing us is that the secret to stopping the Holy Knight's immortality is Conquerors, but clearly we do know that it's not a kill shot. It cannot override it at all completely, which we kind of saw with Roger and Garp's dynamic buddy cop attack on Zebek. So how did Loki do it when even the Pirate King and his wings could not? And now we get to the next really crucial reveal in this chapter. Loki has eaten a devil fruit, and that fruit gives him claws. Meow. That detail alone narrows the field by like a lot of percents, I think. Maybe even 25%. I don't know, man. Like, we are no longer talking about abstract gods, Logia powers, and vague mythological vibes. We saw these marks in the throne room when Luffy, Zoro, and Nami were actually looking for Loki's keys. And it's clear now that he was the one who left all those marks there, not his big wolf that hangs out with him, not Ragnir in squirrel form, not X-Man's Wolverine. It was actually Loki's true power is some sort of mythical zone beast, unfortunately. I mean, it's fine. It's cool, it makes sense. I'll definitely love it once we get the full design, but kind of getting a little bit burned out on those mythical zone bargain sale powers we've been getting recently in One Piece. Like, don't get me wrong, I love mythical fruits. I absolutely love that Luffy had one. I love the entire mythical zones section that we had in Wano and everything, and all the transformations the Goros they have, whether they're fruits or not, but I don't know, I feel like Logia fruits and Paramecia fruits, ever since Whole Cake Island, like with the exception of Green Bull maybe, have kind of just not been relevant at all. You know what I mean? Like, Green Bull had the very cool Forest Logia fruit, which by itself is very weird because it doesn't behave like a Logia fruit to begin with properly. What was the last really cool Paramecia fruit we got, or the last really relevant Logia fruit? It's been a while. I mean, Paramecia's at least had their, time after the time skip in Whole Cake and everything with Katakuri's special Paramecia, and when we still thought that Luffy was a special Paramecia, which he wasn't, also a mythical zone. I miss Logia fruits. They kind of, were these like unbreakable, undefeatable, like powerful things that turned people into literal gods that could not be scratched by Luffy unless you got really creative and worked around the exact element that they had. With Haki, they kind of became insanely irrelevant, and I really need them to become good again and have like a appearance where we see like, oh no, if you use them correctly, they're absolutely insane. Because think about it. The Admirals all have Logia fruits for a reason. They're supposed to be these immovable forces of nature. Right now, I'm not that worried about Aokiji, Akainu, or Kizaru, or Green Bull, because, I mean, yeah, they have powerful elements and stuff, but really the only thing you need to be worried about them is that they have crazy Haki, right? Not that you can't punch them. So if anything, I really hope that Oda's gonna give us something about Logia fruits that shows no. If you use them properly and they're like used by a powerful user, they are the absolute peak, or at least equal with like powerful Paramecia and like zone fruits again. So, yeah, long story short, I kind of wish it would have been a cool Logia fruit that shows us how strong these can actually get. It's another mythical zone, it's pretty cool, but yeah, just like a little rant here about that. And since we know that it's a zone now, of course, it's my job to explain to you what creatures from Norse mythology will fit the bill here, which beasts cover the checkboxes that Oda has given us, and once with lore that would explain Loki's ability to overwrite the abyssal immortality, that also match his visual language, combat style, and of course the overall role that Oda has for him in the story. And I will say that in mythology, going back into it, two really stand quite a lot above the rest. Those are Fenrir and the Nidhugger, the Wolf of Ragnarok and the demonic World Dragon. Now, the same two creatures that I, by the way, also talk about way back at the beginning of this arc, who to this day just continue to really fit the bill. I mean, let's hammer in on Fenrir first, because honestly, it almost feels too perfect to be the case, if you know what I mean, and that's exactly why I'm a little bit skeptical. Fenrir is the monstrous wolf of Norse mythology, and in the lore is actually the child of Loki himself, destined to bring about the end of the world. He's feared not because he's cruel, but because he's inevitable. My man up for being a big dog, and by that I mean the gods of Asgard feared the premonitions of Fenrir. He was the one who would bring about Ragnarok, the end of the universe. And so they sort of just, buried the pup in prophecy and basically just, kind of like crossed fingers hoping that fate would not, be fate. Does this sound at all familiar to you in the context of Elbaf and Loki? I mean, One Piece's Loki is literally chained up in his introduction. He's feared by all, and the hot gossip around town is that he could destroy the world. He also literally says it himself, so kind of believe it. Have you seen the man? Dude's absolutely crazy. And he also surrounds himself with wolves and, just seems to have a similar role to Fenrir in Ragnarok, which I will say could potentially explain how Loki's able to override the immortality given by Imu's deep sea covenant, because Fenrir brings about the end of the cosmos by devouring authority, killing the All-Father Odin himself, and in this case, Odin represents, the system, the way that the divine cosmos is structured. He sees all, he knows all, he impacts all, and yet Fenrir remains absolutely untamed and unafraid of him. A thorn in the All-Father's eye, Fenrir is the one exception that breaks the rules of the universe that Odin has set. So let's just consider exactly what Imu is all about here, dude. It's order, its structure, its system, making their perfect world. That's what we even learn and hear from them in the flashback. They seem all-knowing, all-powerful, very much like Odin does. They sit upon the throne at the top of the world, like Odin does, and Imu was made to boil like Odin does. Oh, wait, hold on. Sorry. Odin and Odin got them mixed up for a minute here. Anyways, Fenrir doesn't beat immortality by powering it straight up. He beats it by Loki just ignoring, the existence or not recognizing the existence of this power somehow. From a conceptual level, Fenrir just straight up represents defiance of the order, and so Loki, the cursed prince, might have the power to just ignore immortality. He might even have abyssal power himself, and that's why he can override it too. It could behave pretty similar to Blackbeard's fruit, just straight up negating devil fruit power for some random reason that'll surely be explained in a short 3 to 10 years from now. And if that's the case, it would explain why Zebek really wanted Harold to eat it, because this whole immortality bypassing somehow, Zebek may have known about that and figured that the legendary fruit of Elbaf should be eaten by the king. Now, ironically, it was then later actually eaten by the one that Ragnir deemed worthy, the runt that Zebek did not deem worthy, by the way, Loki. How irony works. Well, ultimately, if Loki carries Fenrir's legendary role with the fruit of Elbaf, then a Holy Knight's immortality just simply might not apply to himself, and he can just ignore it altogether. Their entire status, their divine protection, and their chosen by the system pass that God Imu handed out just stop working in front of him. If Loki has the Fenrir fruit, then his role is simple and should be very terrifying to the people in power. He isn't meant to rule the world, he's actually just meant to end the authority that claims it owns the entire world right now, like Imu, the world, which also lines up with Nika, by the way. Nika, the destroyer, that is, liberating the world through the destruction of it, the way half of Elbaf seems to actually view the sun god itself, which could kind of explain why Loki sees himself that way. Why Loki sees Nika, and it's exactly what he told us that he would do as well. And whether you like this or not, and I don't know whether I like it or not, but honestly, it just checks out frighteningly well, don't you agree? So, case closed, right? Fenrir, Loki, woo! Nah, I mean, it's definitely a very big contender, the biggest one, and I won't pretend like it's unlikely or anything. But again, I actually just kind of don't want this to be the case because I think the argument is weaker for it, and I really just think I don't want another right hand of the arc character to have a mythical wolf fruit, because Yamato kind of did that one really well already. We don't need Luffy having a pretty nice dog and then a like slightly scary, a big dark evil dog on his team. One's fine, I think. And if you're now curious why I feel this strongly about Loki potentially being Fenrir, I gotta come clean here. The main reason, and you might know what's coming, is that if, as I expect and as I predicted at the beginning of this arc, and I might still be wrong about, but I still think Loki is gonna join the crew, and if that happens, and Loki as Fenrir is a wolf, Then the stocks of Yamato joining the crew, the person who I am still absolutely heartbroken about not having gone with the crew after Wano. Why, Oda, did you do this to me? Well, if we already have a giant wolf on the crew, what's the point even of Yamato joining too? And I kind of want them both on the crew, I gotta be honest. I still hope that after the cover story ended now in Elbaf, that Yamato is on the way to rejoin Luffy, hopefully with the people that they've gathered, right? That's one thing. To be fair though, on the other hand, another thing I talked about way in the past when this was like one of my first 20 videos I think I made, was a video about Shanks where we kind of already talked about all the Norse mythology that he has in his character with the ship and everything and the outfits of his crew. But the main thing with Shanks missing his arm is that this is also part of Fenrir's story, because Tyr, the god that Shanks is based on, is the guy who kind of sacrifices his own arm to Fenrir so the other gods can chain him up. And that's basically the sacrifice that, like Shanks does for Luffy, getting, sacrificing his arm to the Sea King. Now we also know it had the Abyss marking on it, but all that stuff. But it's kind of weird because Shanks obviously, apparently at least, bodied Loki according to what we heard in the story. So that kind of wouldn't make sense. I don't know. Like, there is so much speaking for it, and still I kind of don't want it to happen. And again, I'm at no means saying that Oda won't do this, but I still think that if it's gonna be a mythical Norse creature, the Nidhogger is just the way better representation for several reasons. Let me explain what I mean. The Nidhogger is the draconic serpent who chills down by the roots of Yggdrasil, gnawing endlessly at the roots of the World Tree. He's just straight up chomping on those rooties. Love that for the Nid. And yes, at face value, he looks like a straight up villain, a corruptor, a symbol of decay who chats with a squirrel in his free time, which I'd say already works better for this chapter's reveals than the Fenrir argument. Well, I cannot believe that I'm saying this one too, but thankfully, Norse mythology is never that clean, and later interpretations of the Nidhogger get really interesting and tie into Loki's stuff really, really well too. Because in some versions of the mythology, Nidhogger punishes oathbreakers and the morally rotten. In some others, he's a necessary force of decay and despair, as a force of balance that brings, balance to the universe. Not in the Star Wars, well, maybe kind of in the Star Wars sense, actually. Because without rot, the old world never collapses and the new one can never arise. Sounds awfully Harley texty to me, at least. Darkness and fire, Nidhogg and Sun God, the Hellflame Serpent and Nika. The Hellflame Serpent might just straight up actually represent the Nidhogg, and I'd love for that to be the case. Because as you know at this point, I really just want Loki to be the Hellflame Serpent man, and this Nidhogg case would be kind of ideal for that. Also, you know what else would be ideal? You following the Patreon where I do exclusive content. Not nude content, but it's still pretty good, right? If you like me and what my team do on the channel here, Patreon is a great place to go. We have bonus content, artwork, weekly newsletters about One Piece for free if you just want to check it out. Anyways, back to the Hawk here. We already had an ad. You want to know what the big kicker is? What the shorts ruiner is here? The part that makes me feel really confident that this is the right angle? Well, in some interpretations of Ragnarok, the end of the world, Nidhogger isn't the final villain at all. Nidhogg is the very misunderstood creature that raises the kings up again. He flies them from the underworld to heaven so that they can do their damn job and save the world, which does Loki mean the snake can also fly, which might help with Loki not really fitting on the boat stuff if he joins the crew. Please. And in Loki's case, that could literally be Luffy and Shanks, or Luffy and Blackbeard even. Loki might be the one who paves the way for Luffy, and maybe another person, in the final war, and his role as the chosen wielder of the Ryuryu no Mi model Nidhogg, a dragon fruit, would fit that pretty perfectly, I think. But now suddenly, Loki being chained up in the underworld of Elbaf hits very differently, I think. Like that second shot you shouldn't have taken while you were out at the bar, but your friends all did it and you didn't want to be the odd one out at the bar, so you took the second shot, but then you crossed your darks with your lights, and suddenly 20 minutes later you're out in the back alley, and then you're upside down and your phone's dead, and then you end up across town wearing like someone else's sweatshirt. Also, the secrets to Loki's immortality override start to come through here too, because Nidhogger lives below, in darkness, at the roots of Yggdrasil, like Loki in the underworld, at the base of Elbaf's Atom Tree. Both are feared and restrained, but they aren't raging against the heavens like Fenrir. When we meet Loki, he's actually just casually waiting. Sure, he wants to be let go, right? But he's fine just chilling and talking to his girl Mosa. Also, why does he want to fight Shanks? They all are on the same side in the flashback, so what happened here exactly? Well, if you ask me, there's a couple of things that are possible here. Number one, we already talked about this. Potentially, they're not fighting, and this is just a setup. You know, like Loki and Shanks just being in cahoots, and they've just been playing their part, basically. Another thing that I could see is that Loki finding out what he was supposed to do, you know, with Sebek stuff and whatnot. Maybe Loki wanted to do his thing right away, you know, unbalance the world, do his role right away. And Shanks was like, whoa, 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 whoa. My dear brother, like Luffy is still training right now in the East Blue. You gotta chill. We're not ready to, you know, destroy the world. And Loki was like, nah, we're good. I can take it. And Shanks is like, well, gotta chain you up until we're actually ready. Sorry for that. And Loki's like, dude, what the heck are you doing? We're on the same team. Like, something like that I could very easily see. Or, I don't know, maybe Loki actually did something bad that Shanks kind of punished him for, or the other way around. Maybe Shanks did something that Loki didn't agree with, and Loki tried to fight Shanks, and Shanks was like, sorry, I need to do this, you stay here. Something like that. Also, just like the Nidhogg, Loki kind of seemed to be patiently waiting and letting the rot spread naturally. And those claws we see, the ones that Loki used to slice and dice his father, they aren't just for tearing enemies apart, they dig a little bit deeper, like Minecraft, right? Scraping at the very foundations of the system that his father built up for Emu. Remember how I said that the Nidhogg consumes Oathbreakers and the morally rotten earlier? Did you pay attention? Yeah? Well, essentially, he's an evil person garbage disposal kind of thing, so wouldn't it be perfect for Loki to do this to the Holy Knights, bypassing their mortality, since the power given to them is a terrible oath that's morally rotten at its core, a literal pact with the devil. If Loki has the Nidhogger fruit, then his obsession with ending the world might not actually be about sun gods, world ending, or all that edgy stuff he's talking about. His true purpose might be ending a false world, one ruled by the world government, the people who manipulated and twisted his pure-hearted father's ambition and then shaped the world to their liking. Loki then would be the one designed to destroy the system known as the Abyss, and I just think it makes so much sense for Loki's power to be like perfect in between Luffy and Blackbeard, because it would then have the darkness and ability negation, but can only be wielded by one pure of heart who aims to liberate. That's why you might have Ragnir there looking at who's actually trying to eat it. I think there's a good chance that instead of being the foil to Luffy, Loki is sort of the bridging philosophy and role in between Luffy and Blackbeard, and that would honestly be pretty sick if that happens. I mean, when you really think about it, Loki, Blackbeard, and Luffy, they all share some very similar vibes. They have similar roles and goals, trying to tear down the current system, doing it with a lot of force and, you know, in like a very unconventional way. They all sort of have this weird relationship to Roxy Zebek and have like a similar path that they're following. I don't know, like if Loki didn't become a Straw Hat, he could become a Titanic commander on Blackbeard's crew, though I would kind of like prefer to have him fight with Luffy. And of course, we've already talked about in the past that I think there's a good chance that either before they go to Laugh Tale or afterwards, Luffy and Blackbeard might have to join forces to take down Emu. I still think they're gonna fight, but it's gonna obviously be a very different story if, you know, let's say they fight Emu first, Luffy and Blackbeard team up, but then like they're like, well, now it's all for nothing, and they go for the One Piece, and then they actually fight because they have different philosophies. But it would be very interesting also if they fight first for the One Piece, and then after team up to defeat Emu. In that second scenario, Blackbeard would come out like a little bit as a better guy, I guess. But again, having Loki as that bridging piece, or as maybe even a third in cahoots with everything, that would be very cool and interesting. And I generally don't think that Loki wants to rule what comes next or destroy the actual planet itself. He just wants to make sure the current world can survive, like very much like Kaido, right? Or Who else? Like, all the people who want to destroy the world, but it's actually just the system. Emu, right? Zebek's words were pretty specific, and I think that's why Oda referred to Emu as this concept of the world, more so than a physical entity. It's so that Loki's powers and goals make a lot more sense once we hit the actual meat and potatoes of the final saga. One thing is for sure though, Loki's the man that will ensure this world changes, but have you ever stopped and wondered how big the world actually is in One Piece? Like what the world is that Emu has built? I have. So we mapped it out over a couple of weeks. The One Piece world is absolutely insanely massive, and if you want to see just how gigantical it actually is and every single island that's in it, you can check out this video that I'm very proud of right here. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Thanks to all of our wonderful Patreons. Thank you for being a loyal viewer this year. I really appreciate it. It's been an absolute pleasure making content for you. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next